Hey everyone, hope you're having a great day, or a great night, or great morning, wherever you are in the world watching this video. So, let's continue on Horror Month 2016 with Bride of Frankenstein. It's monster. Seriously. Come on, people. The monster doesn't have a name! Duh! Anyway, let's look at Bride of Frankenstein. On a stormy night, Percy by Sue Shelley and Lord Byron praised Mary Shelley for her story of Frankenstein and his monster. Reminding them that her intention was to impart a moral lesson, Mary says she has more of the story to tell. The scene shifts to the end of the 1931 Frankenstein. Villagers gathered around the burning windmill cheer the apparent death of the monster. Their joy is tempered by the realization that Henry Frankenstein is also apparently dead. Hans, part of the creature drowned in the previous film, wants to see the monster's bones. He falls into a flooded pit underneath the mill, where the monster, having survived the fire, strangles him. Hauling himself from the pit, the monster casts Hans's wife into it to her death. He next encounters Minnie, who flees in terror. Henry's body is returned to his fiancée Elizabeth at his ancestral castle home. Minnie arrives to sound the alarm about the monster, but her warning goes unheeded. Elizabeth, seeing Henry move, realizes he is still alive. Nursed back to health by Elizabeth, Henry has renounced his creation, but still believes he may be destined to unlock the secret of life and immortality. Hysterical Elizabeth cries as she sees death coming, foreshadowing the arrival of Henry's former mentor, Dr. Septimus Pretorius. In his rooms, Pretorius shows Henry several homunculi he has created, including miniature king, queen, archbishop, devil, ballerina, and mermaid. Pretorius wishes to work with Henry to create a mate for the monster and offers a toast of adventure to a new world of gods and monsters. Upon forcing Henry to help him, Pretorius will grow an artificial brain while Henry gathers the parts for the mate. The monster saves a young shepherdess from drowning. Her screams upon seeing him alert two hunters, who shoot and injure the creature. The hunters raise a mob that sets out in pursuit. Captured and trussed to a pole, the monster is hauled to a dungeon and chained. Left alone, he breaks his chains, kills the guards, and escapes into the woods. That night, the monster encounters a gypsy family and burns the sand in their campfire. Following the sound of a violin playing Ave Maria, the monster encounters an old blind hermit, who thanks God for sending him a friend. He teaches the monster words like friend and good, and shares a meal with him. Aww. Two lost hunters stumble upon the cottage and recognize the monster. He attacks them and accidentally burns down the cottage as the hunters lead the hermit away. Taking refuge from another angry mob into a crypt, the monster spreads Pretorius and his cronies, Carl and Ludwig, breaking open a grave. The henchman departs. Pretorius stays to enjoy a light supper. The monster approaches Pretorius, and learns that Pretorius plans to create a mate for him. Dum dum dum. Henry and Elizabeth, now married, are visited by Pretorius. He is ready for Henry to do his part in their grand collaboration. Henry refuses, and Pretorius calls in the monster, who demands Henry's help. Henry again refuses, and Pretorius orders the monster out, secretly signaling him to kidnap Elizabeth. Pretorius guarantees her safe return upon Henry's participation. Henry returns to his tower laboratory, where in spite of himself he grows excited over his work. After being assured of Elizabeth's safety, Henry completes the bride's body. A storm rages as final preparations are made to bring the bride to life. Her bandaged-up body is raised to the roof. Lightning strikes a kite, sending electricity through the bride. Henry and Pretorius lower her and realize their success. "She's alive! Alive!" Henry cries. They remove her bandages and help her to stand. "The Bride of Frankenstein," Dr. Pretorius declares. And again, it should be the Bride of Frankenstein's monster, just saying. The monster comes down the steps after killing Carl and Ludwig on the rooftop and sees his mate. The excited monster reaches out to her, asking, "Friend?" The bride, screaming, rejects him. "She hate me, like others," the monster dejectedly says. As Elizabeth races to Henry's side, the monster rampages through the laboratory. The monster tells Henry and Elizabeth, "Yes, go, you live." To Pretorius and the bride, he says, "You stay. We belong dead." While Henry and Elizabeth flee, the monster sheds a tear and pulls a lever to trigger the destruction of the laboratory and tower. Eesh. Pretty heavy stuff there, huh? Anyway, let's look at some production and other elements of this story. Or movie, I should say. Universal considered making a sequel to Frankenstein as early as its 1931 preview screenings, following which the film's original ending was changed to allow for Henry Frankenstein's survival. James Whale initially refused to direct Bride, believing he had to squeeze the idea dry on the first film. Following the success of Whale's The Invisible Man, producer Colin Lee Jr. realized that Whale was the only possible director for Bride. Whale took advantage of the situation and persuaded the studio to let him make One More River. Whale believed the sequel will not top the original, so he decided instead to make a memorable hoot. According to a studio publicist, Whale and Universal studio psychiatrist decided the monster would have the mental age of a 10-year-old boy and the emotional age of a lad of 15. Screenwriter Robert Florey wrote a treatment entitled The New Adventures of Frankenstein, The Monster Lives, but was rejected without comment in early 1932. Universal staff writer Tom Reed wrote a treatment under the title The Return of Frankenstein, the title retained until filming began. Following its acceptance in 1933, Reed wrote a full script that was submitted to the Hayes office for review. The script passed his review, but Whale, who by then had been contracted to direct, complained that it stinks to heaven. L.G. Bachman and Philip MacDonald were the next writers assigned, but Whale also found the work unsatisfactory. In 1934, Whale sent John L. Balderston to work on yet another version, and it was he who returned to an incident from the novel in which the creature demands a mate. In the novel, Frankenstein creates a mate, but destroys it without bringing it to life. Balderston also created the Mary Shelley prologue. After several months, Whale was still unsatisfied with Balderston's work and handed the project to playwright William J. Hurlbut and Edmund Pearson. The final script, containing elements of a number of these versions, was submitted for Hayes' office review in November 1934. Kim Newman reports that Whale planned to make Elizabeth the heart donor for the bride, but film historian Scott McQueen states that Whale never had such an intention. Sources report that Bela Lugosi and Claude Rains were considered, with varying degrees of seriousness, for the role of Frankenstein's mentor, Pretorius. Others report that the role was created specifically for Ernest Thiesker. Because of Mae Clark's ill health, Valerie Hobson replaced her as Henry Frankenstein's love interest, Elizabeth. Early in production, Whale decided that the same actress cast to play the bride should also play Mary Shelley in the film's prologue, to represent how the story, and horror in general, springs from the dark side of the imagination. He considered Bridget Helma Phyllis Brooks before deciding on Elsa Lanchester. Lanchester, who had accompanied husband Charles Lawton to Hollywood, had met with only moderate success, while Lawton had made a strong impact with several films, including The Private Life of Henry VIII, for which he won an Oscar, and Whale's own The Old Dark House. Lanchester had returned alone to London, and Whale contacted her to offer her the dual role. Lanchester modeled the bride's hissing on the hissing of swans. She gave herself a sore throat while filming the hissing sequence, which Whale shot from multiple angles. Colin Clive and Boris Karloff reprised their roles for Frankenstein as creator and creation, respectively. Hobson recalled Clive's alcoholism had worsened since filming the original, but Whale did not recast the role because of his hysterical quality was necessary for the film. Karloff strongly objected to the decision to allow the monsters to speak. Speech? Stupid! My argument was that if the monster had an impact or charm, it was because he was inarticulate. This great, lumbering, inarticulate creature. The moment he spoke, he might as well played straight. This decision also meant that Karloff could not remove his dental plate, so now his cheeks did not have the sunken look of the original film. Whale and the studio psychiatrist selected 44 simple words for the monster's vocabulary by looking at test papers of 10-year-olds working at the studio. Troy Fry returned to play the doctor's assistant, Carl, having played the hunchback Fritz in the original. Fry also filmed a scene as an unnamed villager in the role of Nephew Glutz, the man who murdered his uncle and blamed the death on the monster. Boris Karloff is credited simply as Karloff, which was Universal's custom during the height of his career. Elsa Lanchester is credited for Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, but not to the earlier film. The Monster's Bride is credited only as question mark, just as Boris Karloff had been in the opening credits of Frankenstein. Universal makeup artist Jack Pierce paid special attention to the monster's appearance in this film. He altered his 1931 design to display the after effects of the mill fire, adding scars and shortening the monster's hair. Over the course of filming, Pierce modified the monster's makeup to indicate that the monster's injuries were healing as the film progressed. Pierce co-created the bride's makeup with strong input from Whale, especially regarding the bride's iconic hairstyle, based on Nefertiti. Lanchester's hair was given a Marcel wave over a wire frame to achieve this style. Lanchester disliked working with Pierce, who said, who she said really did feel that he made these people like he was a god. In the morning he'd be dressed in white as if for a hospital to perform an operation. To play Mary Shelley, Lanchester wrote a white net dress embroidered with sequins of butterflies, stars, and moons, which the actress had required 17 women in 12 weeks to make. Ken Strickfaden created and maintained the laboratory equipment. Strickfaden recycled a number of the fanciful name machines he had created for the original Frankenstein for use in Bride, including the cosmic ray diffuser and the nebularium. The lightning bolt generated by Strickfaden's equipment has become a shock scene, appearing in any number of films and television shows. The man behind the film's special photographic effects was John P. Fulton, head of the special effects department at Universal Studios at the time. Fulton and David S. Horsley created the homunculi over the course of 2 days by shooting the actors in full-size jars against black velvet and aligning them with the perspective of the on-set jars. The foreground film plate was rotoscoped and matted onto the rear plate. Diminutive director Billy Barty is briefly visible from the back in the finished film as a homunculus infant in a high chair, but Will cut the infant's reveal before the film's release. Will met with Franz Waxman at a party and asked him to score the picture. Nothing will be resolved in this picture except the end destruction scene. Would you write another score for it? Asked Whale. Waxman created 3 distinctive themes, one for the monster, one for the bride, and one for Pretorius. The score closes, I Will suggested, with a powerful dissonant chord, intended to convey the idea that the on-screen explosion was so powerful that the theater where the film was being screened was affected by it. Konstantin Bakalennikov conducted 22 musicians to record the score in a single 9-hour session. Shoot began on January 2, 1935, with a projected budget of $293,750, $5.07 million as of 2016, almost exactly the budget of the original, and an estimated 36-day shooting schedule. On the first day, Karloff waded in the water below the destroyed windmill, wearing a rubber suit under his costume. Air got into the suit and expanded like an obscene water lily. That day, Karloff broke his hip, necessitating a stunt double. Clive had also broken his leg. Shooting was completed on March 7, 1935. The film was 10 days over schedule because Whale shut down the picture for 10 days until Heggie became available to play the Hermit. With a final cost of $397,023, $8.58 million as of 2016, Bride was more than $100,000, $1.73 million as of 2016, over budget. As originally filmed, Henry died fleeing the exploding castle. Will reshot the ending to allow for their survival, although Clive is still visible on screen in the collapsing laboratory. Will completed his final cut, shortening the running time from about 90 to 75 minutes, and reshooting and re-editing the ending, only days before the film's scheduled premiere date. Eesh. Bride of Frankenstein was subjected to censorship, both during production by the Hayes office, following its release by local and national censorship boards. Joseph Breen, lead censor for the Hayes office, objected to lines of dialogue in the original submitted script in which Henry Frankenstein and his work were compared to that of God. He continued to object to such dialogue in revised scripts, and to a planned shot of the monster rushing through a graveyard to a figure of a crucified Jesus and attempting to rescue the figure from the cross. Breen also objected to the number of murders, both seen and implied by the script, and strongly advised Whale to reduce the number. The censor's office, upon reviewing the film in March 1935, required a number of cuts. Whale agreed to lead the scene in which Dwight Frye's nephew Glutz kills his uncle and blames the monster, and shots of Elsa Lanchester as Mary Shelley, in which Breen felt too much of her breasts were visible. Curiously, despite his earlier objection, Breen offered no objection to the cruciform imagery throughout the film, including the scene with the monster lashed Christ-like to a pole, nor to the presentation of Pretorius as a coded homosexual. Bride of Frankenstein was approved by the Production Code Office on April 15, 1935. Following its release with the code seal of approval, the film was challenged by the censorship board in the state of Ohio. Censors in England and China objected to the scene in which the monster gazes longingly upon the as-yet unanimated body of the bride, citing concerns that looked like necrophilia. Universal voluntarily withdrew the film from Sweden because of the extensive cuts demanded, and Bride was rejected outright by Trinidad, Palestine, and Hungary. One unusual objection of Japanese censors was the scene in which Pretorius chases his miniature Henry VIII with tweezers constituted making a fool out of a king. That is kind of weird. Christian imagery appears throughout the film. In addition to the scenes of the monster dressed in a cruciform pose and the crucified figure of Jesus in the graveyard, the hermit has a crucifix on the wall of his hut, which, to his consternation, editor Ted Kent made glow during a fade-out. As the monster consumes the Christian sacraments of bread and wine as his last supper with the hermit, horror scholar David J. Scull suggests that Whale's intention was to make a direct comparison of Frankenstein's monster to Christ. Film scholar Scott McQueen, knowing Whale's lack of any religious convictions, disputes the notion that the monster is a Christ figure. Rather, the monster is a mockery of the divine, since, having been created by man rather than God, it lacks the divine spark. In Crucify the Monster, he says, Whale pushes the audience's buttons by inverting the central Christian belief of the death of Christ followed by the resurrection. The monster is raised from the dead first, then crucified. Yeah, that's pretty true. In the decade since its release, modern film scholars have noted the possible homosexual reading of the film. Director James Whale was openly gay, and some of the actors in the cast, including Ernest Lasker and Colin Clive, were believed to be gay or bisexual. Although James Curtis, Whale's biographer, rejects the notion that Whale would have identified with the monster from a homosexual perspective, scholars have identified a gay subtext suffused throughout the film, especially a camp sensibility, particularly embodied in the character Pretorius and his relationship with Henry. Gay film historian Vito Russo, in concerning Pretorius, stopped short of identifying the character as gay, instead referring to him as sissified, sissy itself being Hollywood code for homosexual. Pretorius serves as a gay Mephistopheles, a figure of seduction and temptation, going so far as to pull Frankenstein away from his bride on their wedding night to engage in the unnatural act of creating non-procreative life. A novelization of the film published in England made the implication clear. Having Pretorius say to Frankenstein, "Be fruitful and multiply," let us subject the biblical injunction. You, of course, have the choice of natural means, but as for me, I'm afraid there is no course open to me but the scientific way. The monster, whose affections for the male hermit and the female bride he discusses with identical language, friend, has bred as sexually unsettled and bisexual. Gender studies author Elizabeth Young writes, he has no innate understanding that the male-female bond he used to forge with the bride is assumed to be the primary one, or that it carries a different sexual balance from his relationships with Pretorius and the hermit. All effective relationships are as easily friendships as marriages. Indeed, his relationship with the hermit has been interpreted as a same-sex marriage that heterosexual society will not tolerate. No mistake, this is a marriage, and a viable one. But Whale reminds us quickly that society does not approve. The monster, the outsider, is driven from his scene of domestic pleasure by two gun-toting rubes who happen upon the startling alliance and quickly, instinctively, proceed to destroy it. Writes cultural critic Gary Morris for Bright Lights Film Journal. The creation of the bride scene, Morris continues, is Whale's reminder to the audience, his Hollywood bosses, peers, and everyone watching, of the majesty and power of the homosexual creator. Filmmaker Curtis Harrington, a friend and confidant of Whale's, dismisses this as a young critic's evaluation. All artists do work that comes out of the unconscious mind. Later on you can analyze it and say the symbolism may mean something. Artists don't think that way, and I would bet my life that James Whale would never have such concepts in mind. Specifically, in response to the Majesty and Power reading, Harrington stated, my opinion is that it's just pure bullshit. There's a critical interpretation that has nothing to do with the original inspiration. He concludes, I think the closest you could come to a homosexual metaphor in this film is to identify that certain sort of camp humor. Whale's companion David Lewis stated flatly that Whale's sexual orientation was not germane to his filmmaking, saying, Jamie was first and foremost an artist, and his films represent the work of an artist, not a gay artist, but an artist. Yeah, I think that's pretty true. Well, pretty true if I do say so myself. Well, anyway, this is a pretty good sequel, and I have seen it a couple times, so I give Bride of Frankenstein 5 jack-o'-lanterns out of 5. Well, join me tomorrow as we meet the son of Frankenstein's monster. Yeah, I know, I'm going to keep saying that just because I can. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye.